I live in Dundalk, east of Baltimore, 3 blocks from the water where freighters look like apartment buildings that learn to move. I'm 38, divorced, a tugboat deckhand on the Patapsco. My son, Noah, is 9. On Sundays we walk the pier and guess ship flags. If you grow up here, you learn the smell of steel and diesel the way other people learn lilacs. The bridge, our bridge, was backdrop to everything. Orange at sunrise, necklace at night, shorthand for home. The night the bridge fell, I was on the night list but got bumped. I went home with a microwave burrito and a union thread chirping about overtime. At 1:28 a.m., my phone lit up. Mayday on the river. Collision. Bridge. I stood on the carpet like a man who'd forgotten how shoes work. From my window I could see the faint pulse where the river turns. And then darkness, wrong and honest. I drove to the yard. Sirens braided through Curtis Bay. On the radio, calm voices said terrible things. All call, mass casualty, debris field. The fireboat captain pointed and didn't waste syllables. I threw on a PFD and gloves like I'd been dressed by someone else. Out on the water the air smelled ripped. Ozone, smoke, cold iron shocked awake. Light towers made the river a stage I don't want to remember clearly. We searched for shapes that could be people. Rebar stuck out of black water like ribs. A slab of roadway lay on the ship's bow like a broken promise. I kept saying names inside my skull. The road crew that fills potholes at night. They wave when we idle past. I don't pray, but I held that list like it could be traded for oxygen. We pulled a man out who kept asking for his brother. He kept asking after they took him. That sentence hasn't left me. By dawn the bridge was a torn paper line. Helicopters beat the air into squares. The channel was closed. The port went quiet like an engine killed mid-stroke. I stood on the stern, gloves soaked, and watched gulls hover where the span should have been. Men who never stopped moving stood still. We all touched our radios like worry beads. Somewhere upriver a whistle blew, and nobody answered back. The first week was a calendar dropped in the river. Shifts blurred. We ran search patterns with people I'd only nodded to before. Divers with eyes like math, Coast Guard kids who looked too young until you watched their hands. The Union Hall became a kitchen. Somebody's aunt made trays of ziti that tasted like permission to sit. Each morning the list of found and missing changed by one or none. Hope became inventory you guarded tight. Money got weird fast. With the channel shut, ships stacked up at anchor like angry punctuation. The tug company put us on partial pay and called it good faith. Mortgage was not impressed. My ex, Haley, said, "Take Noah more, the school is sideways." And I said yes because routine is a rope. We built a Lego bridge and pretended the freighter passed under. When the span fell anyway, plastic clatter, Noah looked at me like I'd failed to warn him. I rebuilt it slower. Funerals started. We lined sidewalks in our work jackets while hearses crept by. The city #Baltimore stronged itself because that's what cities do. It helped and it didn't. At a reception for a road worker I knew by nickname, his mother cupped my face and said, "Thank you for looking." As if searching were a task you could finish. I told her the river remembers. Maybe that was only for me. At night I dreamed in orange lights and slow-motion steel. I woke with my hands clenched like they were holding a tow line no one else could see. The company brought in a counselor who said, "Moral residue and secondary trauma," and I wanted to laugh until I didn't. She told us to say the names so they don't turn into shapes. So I said them in my truck, in the shower, over the water. I said the living ones too to keep the math honest. Salvage crews arrived with cranes that looked unreal. They cut the river into numbered pieces and taught us new ways to talk about weight. I volunteered for supply runs because bringing coffee and banding rebar felt like action. On the third run I found my buddy Ray's hard hat on a sawhorse with a sharp note. For the memorial, I sat on a coil of line until my vision widened, then carried the hat to the tent like the top of a candle. The port reopening happened in bites. First a shallow draft, then deeper, then the day the news called full. We cheered like a team that only tied. Work returned with a stutter. You can't unsee a river's ribcage. The first time I took a ship past the scar, I kept my palm on the gunnel like the boat needed a pulse. The pilot murmured headings and we obeyed, small and careful. On the north bank, cranes froze in mid-reach like giants holding breath. Noah's teacher asked me to talk to his class about boats because fourth graders love jobs with verbs. I brought a heaving line and let them miss the bucket until they didn't. A kid asked if I was there when the big thing happened. I said yes and then no, then the truest version I know, close enough to hear and too far to fix. They drew pictures of bridges that all held. Grief made me industrious. The union started a scholarship in the road crews names and asked me to help pick recipients. I read essays at the kitchen table while Noah built ports out of cereal boxes. A girl from Highlandtown wrote about learning to weld because sparks look like her father's laugh. A boy from Essex wrote about his first midwatch on a dredge with his aunt. We gave them checks and promised to show up at graduation in boots. I stopped drinking the week after the collapse without making speeches. I'd been weekend fine for years. After-shift beers that turned into stories missing their endings. After the funerals, the idea of being even 1% less sharp made me sick. On day 49, the counselor said to mark it. I took Noah to the aquarium instead of the bar. We watched a ray skim the glass like a survivor, and high-fived so the slap carried. In July, Haley sat with me on the steps and asked how my head was. The heat had turned the air into a complaint. I told her I count bolts on guardrails when I drive bridges and that I hate closure the way I hate unsinkable. She said Noah sleeps with a flashlight just in case. I laughed, then bought him a better one. We lay on the rug and mapped constellations on the ceiling with names like Channel Marker and Safewater. By fall, the bridge was pieces in yards and lines on paper. Meetings had a new word, resilience, that made me want to clap and spit. The city held a vigil by the water. The pastor said spans only matter when held at both ends. I thought about guys with shovels and cones, about pilots and deckhands, about a mother folding a towel over a chair that won't be used again. Holding is a job, too. They asked for volunteers to teach river safety to new road crews. I brought throw bags and a PVC model. Steel doesn't care about your ego, I said. Neither does current. Check your evasives. Say each other's names at the start of night shift. Let your mouth remember them when your brain goes loud. A foreman who'd lost a worker touched the model like it might answer. After class he said, "You talk like church." I said, "I don't go." He said, "Doesn't matter." On the first anniversary I took early watch, tied a ribbon to the rail where we pause and said the names. The channel felt ordinary, which hurt and healed at once. A container ship gave a long salute, a sound that fills marrow. On shore, a kid on a scooter stopped and searched the air. In the wheelhouse, the pilot stared straight ahead the way you do when you're listening too much. Back home, I found Noah's Lego bridge rebuilt. He'd braced it with popsicle sticks and tape like a small engineer making terms with physics. "It'll hold this time," he said. We sent a photo to the scholarship kids. The girl replied with a clean bead on a plate. The boy sent a selfie in a hard hat where his eyes looked new. Here's what I know, and it isn't a moral so much as a card in my wallet. You can love a thing that failed without lying about it. Names beat numbers. Carry extra gloves. When someone says Mayday, answer even if all you have is coffee. Teach what you learned the hard way. Count the living out loud. Mark the scar on the chart and go slow there. I am a tug hand in Baltimore with a kid who believes tape can make a bridge brave. When we pass the gap, I put my palm to the rail and listen. Steel, water, and something like forgiveness.